Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this year's Irish Cancer Prevention World Cancer Day webinar, Small Steps, Big Impact, Physical Activity for Cancer Risk Reduction. So we have a great lineup of speakers today, and we'll have a panel discussion at the end. So if you have any questions you'd like to ask, you can submit them using the chat function, and we'll aim to answer them during the discussion, or someone from our team may respond to you directly. Unfortunately, we cannot answer any individual medical questions or give individual medical advice, and you should speak to your doctor or healthcare provider if you have any concerns. The webinar will be recorded and circulated along with some information and resources in the coming days to anyone who has registered, and we'll also be circulating a short feedback survey for you to complete. So today's webinar focuses on reducing cancer risk for the general public. Last October, we hosted a webinar on physical activity across the cancer care continuum, which was specifically for health and social care professionals, and the recordings are available to watch back on the NCCP YouTube channel. Today's webinar has been organised by the Irish Cancer Prevention Network, which is a collaboration between Breakthrough Cancer Research, the HSE's National Cancer Control Programme, the Irish Cancer Society, the Marie Keating Foundation, and the HSE's National Screening Service. Its overarching aim is to contribute to the development of a culture conducive to cancer prevention for the Irish population and support delivery of the National Cancer Strategy recommendations in relation to cancer prevention. So before we welcome our first speaker, we're going to play a short video which will give you an overview of the work of the ICPN partner organisations.
Everyone's risk of getting cancer is influenced by a wide range of factors, and although there are things that we can't change, like our age and genetics, there are also factors that we can change, like if we are active, what we eat, whether we drink alcohol, and how we protect our skin from the sun. It is estimated that 30 to 50% of all cancer cases are preventable, and we can all take steps to reduce our risk of cancer. This is why cancer prevention has been a cornerstone of Ireland's National Cancer Strategy since 2017, as it offers the most cost-effective long-term opportunity for the control of cancer. The Irish Cancer Prevention Network, or ICPN, was formed in 2018 to reduce the impact of cancer on the lives of people in Ireland. Its members support and collaborate on national initiatives around cancer risk reduction. ICPN is made up of Breakthrough Cancer Research, the HSE National Cancer Control Programme, the HSE National Screening Service, Irish Cancer Society, and Marie Keating Foundation. Breakthrough Cancer Research fund research, including prevention research, focus on low survival cancers, such as improving management of precancerous conditions like Barrett's esophagus, and provides expertise and patient resources on the impact of diet on cancer. The HSE National Cancer Control Programme works with health service providers and other partners to prevent and treat cancer and increase survival and quality of life by converting knowledge into strategies and actions. The HSE National Screening Service runs 3 population-based cancer screening programmes: Bowel Screen, Breast Check and Cervical Check. Their vision is to work together to save lives and improve people's health. The Irish Cancer Society work to ensure that more people learn how to reduce their risk of cancer and detect cancer early, advocates for improved health policies, provides information sessions and delivers national awareness campaigns. The Marie Keating Foundation has a range of awareness and education services focused on reducing cancer risk through lifestyle choices and highlighting signs of common cancers and how to spot cancer early. Since its launch in 2018, the ICPN has developed evidence, guidelines, information and resources around modifiable cancer risk factors, produced a quarterly newsletter for over 1,000 subscribers, delivered a free e-learning programme on reducing cancer risk for health and social care professionals, delivered annual webinars for the public and health and social care professionals on key cancer prevention topics and themes, and supported the implementation of the National Cancer Strategy and the National Skin Cancer Prevention Plans, with much more planned into the future. We recognise and appreciate the role of those active in community prevention, academia and others, and invite interested groups and individuals to partner with us to grow the network further. We're open to hearing your ideas and feedback. Cancer prevention is a national effort, and we are confident that together we can continue to raise awareness of cancer risk factors and ensure that people are provided with the information and support they need to adopt healthy lifestyles across Ireland.
So our first speaker is Professor Niall Moyna, Professor of Clinical Exercise Physiology in the School of Health and Human Performance in Dublin City University, who's going to speak about how physical activity reduces cancer risk, what the evidence shows.
Good afternoon. This presentation will focus on the role of physical activity and exercise in cancer prevention and survival. So obviously defining these two terms is very, very important at the outset. So we define physical activity as any body movement produced by your skeletal muscles resulting in energy expenditure above rest. But if you really want an easy definition, if you're sitting, if you're reclining, or if you're lying, you are physically inactive. So if you're doing anything other than those three things, you're probably physically active. And that can include most activities, actually, most physical activities are incidental in nature. For example, many of the work-related activities that we do throughout the day, and also home-based activities such as gardening, playing with kids, washing the car, or doing the laundry. And other activities such as commuting to work, shopping, are also examples of daily physical activity. So they're incidental activity that we get throughout the day. In contrast, exercise is discretionary, voluntary, structured physical activity. So it's discretionary. You take it, you voluntarily undertake this activity to improve or maintain your physical fitness or health. And when we think of exercise, we tend to think of sports people, but it's not just sports people. Many of us in our daily life will go to the swimming pool, we'll go to the gym, tennis, cycling, etc., etc. And where we're doing purposeful, voluntary physical activity, that's what we refer to as exercise. Because I'm going to talk about two studies. One is going to relate to physical activity, and the other will relate to exercise. So in Ireland currently, our physical activity guidelines were updated last year, and they recommend that we reduce sedentary time, and we should replace that with some physical activity, and any activity is better than none. So the current guidelines is that we should all get at least 150 minutes of what we call moderate intensity aerobic physical activity. And that's equivalent to a brisk walk. We should get that per week. Or if you want to, you can get 75 minutes of vigorous physical activity, and that's going for a cycle or a jog, something that's a little bit more strenuous and would really get you out of breath. That's our current recommendation. And we should be getting this 150 minutes a week, or 75 minutes of vigorous activity a week. So the big question is, does meeting these physical activity recommendations give you a quantifiable protection against cancer? That's the big question. And that's what this study set out to answer. It's an excellent study. It was published in 2019. And what it examined the dose, what we call the dose-response relationship between physical activity and cancer risk. Now, what it did, it involved the pooled analysis of 9 large prospective studies undertaken in the US, Europe, and Canada. And it involved over 750,000 participants. And they were followed for approximately 10 years. And there were 50,000 cancers accrued and were analyzed during that time. And importantly, the most important finding of this study was achieving the recommended dose of physical activity was associated with a significantly lower risk for 7 different cancers. These included liver, myeloma, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, kidney, endometrial, colon cancer in men, and breast cancer. That was a really, really significant finding. Now, one of the most striking findings in the study was that achieving the recommended dose of physical activity does not have a uniform effect. As you can see here, the strength of association between being physically active and your risk reduction, it varied depending on the type of cancer. For example, if you met the recommended amount of physical activity, it reduces your risk of breast cancer from 6 to 10%. In contrast, it reduces your risk of liver cancer from 18 to 27%. And as you can see, it varied the relationship between the dose, meeting the recommended dose of physical activity and reduction for these 7 cancers. It varied. It wasn't the same for all of the cancers. And this large difference may reflect important differences underlying the biological mechanisms responsible for the effect of exercise on each of those cancers. Now, you know, in the world of fitness, it is common to assume that more is always better. And this research challenges that notion, particularly in relation to cancer. And what they found is two different patterns emerge or were identified here. In fact, for some cancers, the benefit kept increasing. The more activity you did, the greater the benefit that you got. So, for example, the risk for breast, colon, endometrial, esophageal, adenocarcinoma, and head and neck cancers continue to decrease as people engaged in physical activity, even beyond the recommended daily levels. So for these cancers, pushing further did yield additional benefits. And we'll look at two examples here. Here was breast cancer. And as we can see, this is the recommended, this is the amount of activity we should get each day, between 150 to 300 minutes. Don't worry about what's on the bottom here. That's just another way of expressing it. So this is the recommended. But as you can see for breast cancer, if you go beyond the recommended, you still get a decrease in risk for breast cancer. And we see the exact same thing with colon cancer, an improved risk with the more activity that we undertook. For other cancers, okay, the benefits began to plateau. So for example, for kidney, gastric cancers, liver cancers, and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, particularly in women, most of the risk reduction was achieved by just attaining the recommended amount of physical activity per day. And beyond that point, doing more physical activity was associated with little or any additional risk reduction. And again, here's two examples. Here is liver cancer. So here's the recommended dose. You can see you get a huge reduction once you start engaging in physical activity, and it plateaus out just at the maximum daily recommended levels, and you get no further benefit if you go beyond that. We take a look at kidney cancer. We say you have to meet the recommended dose before you start to see a benefit. But then, as you can see, if you get to the maximum recommended dose of around 300 minutes of moderate intensity, you don't get any appreciable benefit by going beyond that amount of activity. So for the second type of cancers, for example, the liver and the kidney cancer, consistency at the recommended level is the most critical factor. Whereas the other cancers, the more you do, the more benefit that you're going to actually accrue. So the key message here is that the relationship between exercise and cancer risk reduction is not a one size fits all. It depends on the cancer. The study also uncovered specific instances where the protective effects of physical activity were not the same for both sexes. And again, this just underscores the complexity of cancer biology. For colon cancer, the reduced risk associated with exercise was evident in men, but was attenuated in women. In contrast, for non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a reduced risk was observed only in women who exercise, but the same effect was not seen in men. So these findings again highlight that risk factors do not always operate universally. So again, another striking finding was that the strength of the association between the intensity of activity and risk reduction varied depending on the type of cancer. For example, moderate intensity activity showed a significant association with lower risk for breast and kidney cancer, whereas you had to undertake vigorous intensity activity before you saw an appreciable risk in endometrial cancer. And then, as we can see in colon cancer, it was borderline significant for both moderate and vigorous physical activity. A common assumption is that physical activity helps prevent cancer primarily by helping individuals maintain a healthy body weight or BMI. So what they did in this study, they adjusted for BMI and found that most of the cancers studied, the risk reduction associated with physical activity remained. So basically what this tells us that physical activity itself confers biological benefits against cancer that are independent of weight control. There was one exception, and this was the association between exercise and endometrial cancer. This disappeared after you adjusted for BMI. So this indicates that specifically for endometrial cancer, the protective benefit is indeed likely mediated through weight management. So again, for all the others, however, this should actually be a powerful motivator because it shows that the physiological effects of exercise on hormones, inflammation, metabolism offer a direct line of defense regardless of what your body weight is. So that's a very, very important message. So the take-home message from the study was that there is now robust evidence to recommend 150 to 300 minutes of moderate or 75 to 150 minutes of vigorous intensity physical activity per week to lower the risk of 7 distinct cancers. And for several cancers, additional benefits may be gained by activity levels exceeding the minimal recommendation. However, these are observational data, okay? And so we track someone over time, and these consistently link post-cancer treatment physical activity to lower reoccurrence. So we're now looking at survival, and we know that if you're physically active after you've got over your cancer, that will increase survival. However, just because there's a relationship between something or a correlation does not mean a cause and effect. Okay, so this definitive causal evidence is lacking, and that requires a randomized controlled trial. And the first big trial ever undertaken was published last July, called it'll come to me now in a moment. It'll come to me in a moment. So this trial, what it did was it looked at colon cancer. And the study recruited patients with stage 3 or high stage 2 colon cancer who underwent standard treatment that included surgical resection followed by adjunctive therapy. And up to 40% of patients have disease reoccurrence. And the adverse effect of treatment undermines also their quality of life. So in fact, it was called the Challenge trial, and this was a phase 3 international randomized controlled trial where 889 patients who underwent complete resection and completed the adjuvant therapy 2 to 6 months earlier were randomized to an exercise program for 3 years. So now this is exercise or health education. Okay, and what we find here is during a median follow-up of 8 years, the primary endpoint, which was disease-free survival, that was risk of reoccurrence or death, was significantly favored in the exercise group. They had a greater disease-free survival. In fact, if you look at the 5-year disease-free survival, it was 80% in the exercise group and 74% in the health education group. So basically, in effect, the exercise reduced the risk, or the hazard ratio indicated that exercise reduced the risk of disease reoccurrence or death by 28%. If you look at overall survival, this was a key secondary endpoint, and it again favored the exercise group, 90% versus 83%. And again, overall survival improved significantly with a 37% reduction in the exercise group. And again, if you look at baseline, there was no difference between physical activity levels or fitness levels between the two groups. But during the 3-year study, the individuals in the physical activity group increased their levels of activity and also improved their aerobic capacity. Okay, so in effect, this study showed that exercise, planned, structured physical activity improves disease-free survival in colon cancer patients. And hopefully we'll see further studies in other cancer types. So the biological rationale for this was improved immune function, reduced systemic inflammation, and improved insulin sensitivity. But what we need to do now is we need to continue with these kind of studies. We clearly understand that exercise is beneficial for reducing cancer and for improving survival. We now have to understand the appropriate dose-response relationships specific to each cancer. Thank you.
So thank you, Professor Moyna. Our next speaker is Dr. Emer Guinan, Associate Professor in Cancer Rehabilitation and Survivorship at Trinity College Dublin, who's going to speak about practical lifestyle guidance on easy ways to add movement at home, work, or in the community, and where to start.
So thank you for the invitation to present to you today around tips for starting to increase your physical activity, small steps for big impact. And during the course of today's presentation, I'm going to focus on 3 main areas. Firstly, understanding physical activity. What is it we're talking about? And trying to make it more manageable for you to think about how you can incorporate physical activity into your daily lives. Secondly, then I want to reflect on how we change behaviour and why that's not always easy, and what we need to think about in order to be in the right frame of mind to change our behaviour. And finally, I'm going to talk about some practical tips and ideas for integrating movement into your daily lives. So today's presentations have all been about physical activity, and we've heard this, that physical activity refers to any bodily movement produced by skeletal muscle that requires energy expenditure. And it's really important that we think about that for a few minutes, because physical activity is not just exercise. It's any bodily movement produced by the skeletal muscle that requires energy expenditure. And I think when we think about that and we start to break it down, we start to think about physical activity being a little bit more achievable across lots of different domains of our lives. So our traditional physical activity or exercise piece is this domain of leisure time physical activity. And that's your walking, your jogging, your sport, your gym, your cycling, all of these activities that we typically associate with getting out and doing some exercise. And that is a great form of physical activity, and lots of people enjoy that. And for lots of people, that's really where you want to be. But it's not the only domain of physical activity. We can be physically active through our occupation, in the work that we do, in our household chores, and also in our transport. And today's presentation hopefully will get you to think about how you can incorporate small steps for physical activity across all 4 domains. So in terms of our occupation, reflecting on, well, do we have an active occupation or do we have a sedentary occupation? For lots of us, it's sedentary. We spend a lot of time sitting. So how can we incorporate some activity into our occupation? And we'll reflect on that. Our household, while we may not want to think about, our jobs like hoovering or, washing and doing laundry, etc., as opportunities for activity, we are physically active during those times. And maybe it's about acknowledging the activity that we do during those jobs. But also things like gardening can be very physically demanding, and our childcare activities. So, if you're with small children, can you go outside and do an activity together, kick a football, play tag, play hide and seek, all of these opportunities to be active. Active transport then, this is probably one of the biggest opportunities that we have. Can we displace some, be it public transport or car transport, to be active? Can we walk? Can we use our transport or our commute time to incorporate some physical activity? And for many people who are busy, this is probably one of the key opportunities where you can embed physical activity in a purposeful way, where you are getting from A to B. You just need that little bit of extra time perhaps to do it, in contrast to taking the car or taking the bus for the entire journey, for example. The other thing that we want to think about is almost the opposite of physical activity. It's this concept of sedentary behavior. So prolonged sitting or prolonged lying. And a lot of us are really sedentary in our day-to-day lives. We might have sedentary jobs. We sit at a desk all day long without moving. And how many of us spend the evening time sitting on the sofa, watching TV, on our phones at the same time? All of these are prolonged sedentary behaviours, and they're all opportunities to break up that sedentary behaviour and incorporate some physical activity into that. We know more and more that this prolonged sedentary behaviour is something that we need to target. It's not good for our health. And even when we are physically active, we really need to be mindful of the amount of time that we're spending sitting, that we're spending sedentary, and starting to break that up. So that's really achievable for a lot of us. And we'll talk through some tips about how to do that as well. And this concept of reflecting on, well, look, it doesn't have to be insurmountable physical activity. It doesn't have to be the big walk or the big run or the big gym session, but that every move counts. This aligns completely with our National Physical Activity and Sedentary Behaviour Guidelines for Ireland, where we're trying to acknowledge and celebrate physical activity in every form across every domain, and really be mindful about how we incorporate physical activity into our daily routines and break up that prolonged sedentary behaviour. So let's keep that in mind as we think about, well, how can you start to incorporate physical activity into your daily lives? Now, today's session is all about physical activity in terms of cancer prevention and cancer risk. And it's one of the benefits of physical activity that we can potentially reduce the risk of certain cancers by being physically active throughout our lives. And we know that there's other health benefits as well. So we all know that it's good and we all know that it's important. So why don't we just move more? And the reality is that changing behavior, such as increasing your physical activity levels, isn't easy. It is very, very difficult. And we need to acknowledge that and reflect on, well, what are the barriers or what are the factors that are limiting me from being more physically active, and reflect on those honestly and think about, well, how can you change those or take control of those in order for you to successfully change your behavior? And there's lots of barriers out there. Lack of time is probably one of the biggest ones. Lots of people on this webinar today are really, really busy. You have busy jobs, you might have long commutes, you might have caring responsibilities, be it small children, be it parents, whatever it is that life has, in your life at the moment. It can be very difficult for you to carve out time for yourself and prioritize time for yourself, even if it's to do something good like being physically active. So that lack of time is probably one of the biggest barriers that busy people will face. And it's important when we start thinking about being physically active that you set yourself up for success so that your goals for physical activity are achievable, that they are set in consideration of the time constraints that you have, and that they are practical, that they are incorporated. Maybe that active transport piece is a way that you can incorporate physical activity in a way that doesn't take a huge amount of extra time, but has lots of additional benefits. So time is one thing we all need to reflect on. Secondly, lack of social support. If you're, in a household where everybody's physically active, it might be easier for you then to be more physically active as well, because people encourage and celebrate that. But if that's not the case, well, then you're starting from scratch. You're starting from a different different perspective. Social support is really important. Being able to meet a friend or go somewhere with a friend, being encouraged to be physically active and being part of kind of an overall routine that's celebrated by others within your social network can be really, really helpful. Lack of energy. When you're already tired, the idea of going out and being physically active is just, it can seem very, very difficult. Lack of motivation. Is this something that you really want to do at this time? And then in the next slide, we'll think about, well, where are you? Do you want to do this? Is it something that you want to change? Fear of injury, particularly if you had a bad experience where you were injured after becoming physically active and you're fearful of that happening again, or if you've had an illness and you're returning to physical activity after that and you're not sure where to start. Lack of skill. So being worried that, well, in order for me to be physically active, I need to attend the gym or I need to go for a run, and I don't feel skilled in doing any of those. So it's important that we step back and think about, well, what physical activity is within your reach that you can do? Or if you really do want to take on a new activity that requires a new skill, how do you get the support to do that? High cost, particularly if you're thinking about physical activity with an associated cost, something like gym attendance or class attendance. And linked in with that is lack of facilities. So, we think about, having a gym to go to, but it equally could be lack of facilities in terms of getting out for a walk, safe footpaths or street lighting so that you can get out at times that are flexible and work around your busy schedule. And finally, weather conditions. The weather here in Ireland doesn't always work in our favour. And if it is lashing rain, are you still happy to get out for a walk? Is that going to be a barrier for you? So we need to think about all of these things. And I suppose, are you ready to change your behaviour? When you reflect on those barriers, which ones apply to you? Do you have the skills and the knowledge to exercise? Do you know what you're going to do? Do you know how much physical activity that you're aiming to achieve? And do you know how to do it? Do you have access to space to exercise or to social support? Do you have somebody who's going to encourage you, who you're going to be accountable to, who might go exercising with you, for example? And do you have that space? Do you have a safe footpath to get out for a walk? And if you don't at home, where do you have that space so that you can incorporate physical activity? And the bottom line, do you want to do it? Are you ready to change? Is your life, is it something that you can incorporate in? Is it the right time for you to change your behavior? Is it something that's already a habit? Are you trying to start a new habit? And how are you going to do that? And I think we need to reflect on all of that. What is your motivation? How are you going to do it when your energy is low? So wanting to change and wanting to be more physically active is a big part of you sitting back and being able to identify where you can find these opportunities for movement in what might be an already very busy life. So really think about how that applies to you and reflect on that more at the end of the presentation. So practical tips. So when people are busy, and really that's what we want to think about in this presentation, people who are busy at work, people who are busy at home, how can you incorporate movement? Well, let's think about this in the context of what we've been talking about. Physical activity across all, not just talking, celebrating every movement and thinking about our physical activity guidelines. Every movement counts and breaking up sedentary behavior. So if there are goals, let's think about how we achieve work and at home. So at work, incorporating movement where you can. So can you engage in walking meetings? So if you have a meeting scheduled with somebody, if the topic isn't overly formal and you're able to talk through the main points during a walk, can you do that instead of sitting on Teams together? Active transport opportunities. When you're getting to work, can you incorporate activity? And this is probably one of the most practical tips. Can you walk instead of taking a bus, taking the Lewis, taking the Dart, etc.? Can you park a little bit further away and walk in? That is, it works because you're going to work first thing in the morning. You're in the right mindset. I'm going to do this now. You're going to get out and incorporate that walk, but also it has purpose. You're getting from A to B. So your walk, you're getting both exercise in and you're getting to where you need to go. Taking the stairs instead of the lift. And that's this concept of every single movement, every activity that you can incorporate is good. So celebrate those small wins. Taking micro breaks. So if you're in a sedentary job, can you say, right, hour, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go for a little walk. Or if you're working from home, can you incorporate some kind of exercise snacks, like doing X number of squats or lunges, or whatever it may be, that you're incorporating some small purposeful movement throughout your day in really small bite-sized chunks that's incorporated within your work schedule. At home, valuing your daily tasks is really important. So valuing when you're out gardening, I'm being physically active now. Your house when you're being physically active. Incorporating play for you and the kids. So when you're thinking about what activity you want to do some Saturday afternoon, that you're thinking about, right, well, let's go to the playground, or let's go somewhere where we can go and have a walk, or simply going out into the garden, playing football, playing hide and seek, playing take, whatever it is you want to do. Incorporating active hobbies for the kids as well. It's good for you and it's good for them. And then breaking up that sedentary time, being really mindful in the evening time about how long you're spending sitting on the sofa. Can you break that up? Can you be mindful and say, look, I'm going to turn off the telly at X time and I'm going to go and I'm going to do something else. So really even reflecting on or keeping a diary of the amount of time that you're spending sedentary in the evenings can be helpful for helping you to break that down. How do you set yourself up for success though? Because we can all do those practical tips, but how do you make sure that you actually incorporate them and that you sustain that change in behavior? Well, setting yourself up in a way that you're incorporating activity, that it's flexible and that it's affordable, that you're overcoming some of those barriers that we spoke about earlier. Things like walking, if you want to go running or if you want to go jogging or cycling, but walking is very accessible to an awful lot of people. And as we said, you can incorporate it both as your evening activity or as an active transport option. Walking works well because you can do it, you can incorporate it around your schedule. The frequency of the number of walks, you determine that. The duration, it doesn't have to be a big hour-long walk. It can be a 15, 20-minute walk, whatever works for you on a particular day. You can start at your front door or at your office door and you end there. So you don't have to drive somewhere. You don't have to go somewhere. You're not working around other people's schedules. And when you're busy, that matters. Because if you sign up for a class, for example, while that might work for some people in terms of having accountability and you've paid for it and you have a structure, for other people, if you're really busy and you sign up for a class and you start missing those classes because the scheduling of the class and the scheduling of your life just don't work together, that can be really, really difficult. So walking, running, jogging, cycling, anything that goes from door to door can work really well when you're busy. Also have a look and see what online resources are available. If it's difficult for you to get out in the evenings because of maybe caring responsibilities, see what you can join online. Are there any classes that you can link in on that you can do and get other people in the house involved as well? Setting realistic goals. You don't have to set yourself up that you're active every single day if that's not going to work for you to get started. Set yourself up that I'm going to go for a walk 2 evenings per week. Be accountable to somebody. Tell someone that you're going to do it, somebody who's going to hold you to account and celebrate your wins. When you set yourself up for success and you achieve it, that's a really good feeling, as opposed to setting yourself up for something that's going to be really difficult to achieve and then feeling, look, I'm not quite getting this. So work with you where you are and set yourself up for success. Enjoyment. It's really important that you get that buzz out of being physically active, that you feel good about yourself afterwards, that you feel you've achieved something. So make sure it's fun. Make sure it's an activity that you enjoy. If you feel that you're going running and you're really, really not liking it, try something different so that you feel good about getting out. And do try and leverage some social support. When you're returning after illness or injury, that can be tricky because, of course, you're at a different baseline to where you were before. And it can be a little bit disheartening when you start and you realize, gosh, I can't do what I used to be able to do. So you do need to go into this with a slightly different mindset. You need to have a sensible starting point. Again, setting those realistic goals and knowing, look, I've been injured or I've been away sick. So look, I need to build myself back up. That gradual progression. So your goal setting should celebrate small wins. Listen to your body, listen to what your body is telling you in terms of how it's coping with this new activity, and incorporate in some pacing and some rest. Now, if you've been out injured and you've been working with someone like a physio, talk to them about how you return to exercise. Or if you've been unwell, perhaps talk to your GP or talk to your physio if you have concerns about returning to activity after illness or injury. But really think about, you're at a new baseline and you're setting yourself up, and you can set yourself up gradually to get back to where you were. So what should you do now? You're listening to this webinar, you're taking the first steps in terms of informing yourself around physical activity and how beneficial it can be in terms of cancer prevention. But how do you feel about increasing your physical activity? Is it the right time for you? So if you're listening and you're like, do you know what, I've no intention of starting, life is just, I'm not in the right headspace, what you're doing right now is good. You're increasing your awareness of the benefits, you're informing yourself, you're gaining more knowledge, and that might be the right thing for you at this time. If you're thinking about starting, you're saying, do you know what, maybe I will, I'm not sure if I'm ready, but weigh up the pros and cons. Think about why it might be good and think about the challenges that you might face. If you start taking small steps, so you've bought a new pair of runners, or you've made a New Year's resolution, or you've bought some new exercise clothes, well then set small, achievable, specific goals. Okay, say I'm going to get out for a walk twice a week this week and celebrate achieving that goal at the end of the week. If you've been exercising for 6 months, you've started, you're getting into your routine, that's where you really need to start getting into your social support and your self-monitoring so that you can see improvements. You can look back and you say, gosh, 4 months ago, I could only run this distance. Now I can run a longer distance, or I can run faster, whatever matters to you. And if you're exercising regularly for more than 6 months, really find enjoyment in what it is you're doing. Focus on preventing injury and focus on preventing that relapse back to being sedentary or inactive again. So really think about where you are and what you might do to start being more physically active. So to summarize, we should look for opportunities to be physically active in every domain of life. It's not just about going to the gym or exercising at a hard level. It's about looking at every opportunity that presents across all domains of life. Set yourself up for success. Set goals that are going to work for you and celebrate achieving those goals. Remember that every move counts. Everything you can do to incorporate activity is of benefit. Tackle time spent sedentary. Be mindful of how long you're spending in the evening sitting in front of the telly and break that up. And really think about, are you ready to start? Is this the right time for you? So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Guinan. Our next speaker is Janet Boren, Healthy Ireland Coordinator in Kilkenny County Council, who's going to speak about easy ways to add movement into everyday life with an overview of the You Can Act project, which focuses on the built environment in terms of physical activity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today, on World Cancer Day, I'm going to present to you on a project that we're involved with for the last 3 years called Urban Action Against Cancer, so You Can Act for short, physical activity in public urban green spaces for cancer prevention. So this was a transnational intersectoral initiative involving 8 partners across 5 countries in Europe and was funded by the EU Commission. This brought together physiotherapists, local authorities, non-for-profit organisations, academic institutions, with the overall objective to engage adults and senior citizens to practice physical activity as a tool for cancer prevention within public urban green spaces. So this project targeted people over the age of 50 who have never been diagnosed with cancer, so looking at primary prevention, those diagnosed with cancer, secondary prevention, or cancer survivors. The overall purpose of the You Can Act project was to encourage adults to engage in physical activity in the great outdoors in public urban green spaces and to establish if this project is accepted by the target group and if it had any impact on health outcomes, to which I'll come to later on in the presentation. So I mentioned earlier that this project involved 5 countries, but 3 countries were part of the implementation of the project. So Kilkenny in Ireland, we had Munich in Germany, and Bologna in Italy were all part of the implementation phase. So for the sake of this presentation, I'll focus on the Irish structures of the project. So the 2 lead partners on the consortium were Kilkenny County Council, and this is the local authority that I work for. We are responsible for the provision of an extensive range of public service which promote the interests of local communities and play a crucial role in maintaining and enhancing the quality of life of citizens. So my role in Kilkenny County Council is the Healthy Ireland Coordinator, and I have a remit around health and wellbeing. The Irish Society of Chartered Physiotherapists were the other lead partner, and they are the national professional body representing over 4,000 chartered physiotherapists in Ireland. So this was a 3-year pilot programme. At the start of the project, it involved the research elements that were delivered on by the academic partners in the project. This covered evidence on physical activity for cancer prevention, good practices for cancer prevention, physical activity sessions within public urban green spaces, and challenges and barriers associated with participation in physical activity in the outdoors. Now, I won't go too much into the research elements, as I know they'll be covered in other presentations today. The research element then led to the design of pilot programme methodology and tools. This involved training manual and online learning modules for physiotherapists involved in the You Can Act programme. This covered things like screening tools, exercise prescription, and education on cancer prevention physical activity. So this was a mix of cardiovascular exercise, muscular endurance and strength, stretching and mobility. And of course, the balance exercises, all considered to be evidence-based. The training also looked at the considerations and contraindications for exercise and cancer, progression of the programme and implementation in the public urban green spaces. Kilkenny County Council developed a citizen engagement strategy for locally, and that looked at mapping who needs to be involved in terms of the stakeholders, how we're going to recruit the participants and communicate the project, the processes around the recruitment, and how do we keep those people engaged in a meaningful and effective way. Our partners in Italy also developed the You Can Act app. So the app complemented the programme that was being delivered by the physiotherapists. The app also included an education element and a chat function for social engagement. The main phase of the programme then involved the implementation and evaluation of the pilot programme. So this involved the rollout of the 2 pilot programmes that were 10 weeks in duration of each time. These were evaluated in terms of health outcomes, so looking at standardised measurement tools around quality of life, physical activity levels, falls risk, fatigue scores. We also looked at open-ended feedback through focus groups. This happened in between the programmes so that we could address any challenges or barriers, and so we could improve the programme for the second pilot round. At the end, the standardised measurement tools then measured the health outcomes and looked at the focus groups again to get the open feedback. So in terms of the stakeholder team then in Kilkenny, many stakeholders were involved. So Kilkenny County Council and the Irish Society of Chartered Physiotherapists were lead in bringing UConnect to life in Kilkenny. And we had the oversight. Trinity College Dublin were involved in many elements of the project in terms of ethics, looking at screening and being responsible for the evaluation and helping us implement the programme throughout. In terms of the physiotherapists then, we had a public-private partnership, so looking at the public physiotherapists were involved from New Park Primary Care Centre in the HSE and our private physiotherapists from Kilkenny Physiotherapy. We also had student involvement from the University of Limerick. So the students could avail of all of the training, and any of the students that were in our local hospital in St. Luke's at the time were released for the programme to help with the screening and to help with the exercise prescription and leading on the programmes each week. So student learning and development was part of this programme and a very valuable part. Other agencies were involved from the prospect of looking at promoting the project, doing communications and gatekeepers for recruitment. So for example, our wonderful local cancer support service, Cushnor, directly recruited people living with cancer and in survivorship of cancer. They were also involved in many elements of the project and really supported us through that. Other community services that we looked at to recruit were in family resource centres, the Nordragon Paddlers, there's community groups, our local sports partnership, our health promotion department from the Chronic Disease Hub and our health promotion officer in cancer prevention. And our Older Persons Council was also a really good source of recruitment and through our local media. So as I mentioned at the start, it's very important to map your stakeholders who needs to be involved, communicate in a very clear manner about the UConnect project to get buy-in from stakeholders, but also from interested participants. This was successful in terms of the recruitment only took a week for each programme and we had waiting lists each time, so there was really big appetite for a programme like this. The screening clinics then were undertook by the physiotherapists involved, and that allowed participants to be screened if GP clearance was required and inclusion to set the exercise level from the start. Then the implementation of the UConnect pilot programs were conducted in 2024, so that happened into early 2025, so that happened over 10 weeks each time, and then at the end the programme was evaluated. So from the perspective of the local authority, we have a huge role to play in our environment and having our green spaces accessible for programmes, health programmes like UConnect. So we undertook an audit of our 3 green spaces in Kilkenny City. And things that were taken under serious consideration were around safety and risk assessments. There had to be parking close by. We needed to have public transport close to the green spaces. We need to select less exposed areas. Seating is really, really important, particularly for those at lower exercise levels, so there is areas for rest. Bathrooms is probably one of the most important elements of having close by or on the green space for programs like UConnect. The exercise area then, non-slip, flat surface, areas to have balance, and they also has to be accessible for wheelchairs and mobility aids, and areas for shelter then if possible. So these were key considerations when we're selecting our green spaces. So here's some pictures from the programs that were run over 2024. So we had 2 pilot rounds. 63 people were recruited in Kilkenny. There was 212 recruited across Europe. 6 physiotherapists were involved, 36 in total. So for each session, we would have had 2 senior physiotherapists on the green space with about 3 or 4 students at each of the sessions. So we had 10 physiotherapy students involved attending the programs. And then 3 of our parks were utilised with 38 sessions delivered in total and 132 across Europe. So the results then, the participants demonstrated positive health outcomes, including improved physical activity levels, improved quality of life, decreased fatigue, improved sleep and social well-being, and sense of positive well-being from exercising in a green space. In terms of feedback, it showed the UCANAP programme encouraged the target group to be active in the outdoors. The physiotherapists and local authority roles in delivering the activity sessions were critical to successful engagement, and participants would highly recommend the programme, felt the benefits at a cardiorespiratory, balance and strength level, enhanced social interaction and reduced anxiety. Daily living tasks also improved. And there is a high value placed on the well-being and exercising in the outdoors on a green space. So I read out some of the participant quotes. Everyone was so kind, I thought I might hold people up, but everyone did the exercises in a way that suited them. I really can see the improvement in my mobility. I don't need to use my hands to push myself to stand up anymore. The physios took great care of me and worked at my pace. Everyone was so good. I found the whole experience to be excellent. I love the encouragement to improve each week in a safe way. I really benefited from the programme and loved the freedom of exercising outside in all weathers. So you can see there from those quotes that people felt safe and that they could progress at their own level and that they really enjoyed exercising in the outdoors, and highlights the importance of a physio-led programme. So motivators to attend the UCANAP programme were about increasing fitness, strength, improving positive mental health, quality of life, better health outcomes, to feel good, to socially connect with each other, the cup of tea, coffee and chat. So the cup of tea and coffee were very regular after some of the sessions, and is something that we facilitated as part of the pilot programs. And as stakeholders, we need to acknowledge the importance of creating that environment that is welcoming, social, and brings people together. The cup of tea and chat afterwards is just as important for our well-being. And just to note that some people might show up for the exercise, but some people are showing up for that cup of tea and coffee while reaping the benefits of the exercise. So in conclusion then, for this pilot programme, multi-stakeholder collaboration in establishing and delivering UCANACT involved local authorities, the HSE, physiotherapists, academia, local cancer and community support services. Exercise recommendations and training for physiotherapists were effective in delivering the UCANACT pilot programme in green spaces. And the project highlighted the value of exercise in green space and physiotherapy supervision. The citizen engagement strategy developed by the Council was effective in stakeholder and citizen involvement and continued participation in the UCANAP programme. This is an example of a physiotherapist-led, community-based pilot programme that can support people with and beyond cancer, while also enhancing student learning and partnership working. With an ageing population and rising cancer survivorship, programmes like this are essential for adults over 50, supporting primary and secondary prevention, recovery, and long-term quality of life in the community. And if you're someone attending today that is thinking of starting an exercise programme, or you're struggling maybe to stay involved in exercise, I would recommend that you link in with your local area, see what's happening. So maybe link in with your local physiotherapist, see if they're doing classes, link in with your local sports partnership, see what's happening out there in the county, or link in if you're somebody living with cancer, it'd be a good shout to link in to your local cancer support services, where they'll be able to signpost you appropriately, because this project demonstrates that that group setting of exercise can keep you engaged in programs like UCANACT. And just also finally to highlight that this project got a lot of international attention as well. So it was presented at the World Physiotherapy Conference in Japan last year. It was also presented in Brussels in the EU Parliament. The outcomes in the project were presented at an event there, and it's also been shortlisted for a number of awards as well. And thank you.
Thank you, Janet. So our final speaker today is Dr. Patricia Sheehan, an exercise oncology researcher and lecturer in the Department of Sports and Exercise Science at Southeast Technological University, who's going to speak about the importance of physical activity for everyone across the cancer spectrum and give an overview of the XWELL programme.
Hi, so I am Dr. Patricia Sheehan from SETU in Waterford, and I am here today to talk to you, I suppose, about small steps that make a big impact on your life when it comes to physical activity and cancer reduction. We're going to look at why it matters, how we can build these small steps into your life, and then what I really want to do is show you and open your eyes to real life examples of what's actually out there. So we know that cancer affects almost every family in Ireland, with 1 in 2 of us receiving a diagnosis in our lifetime. And while some risk factors like age or genetics are just beyond our control, others are not. And physical activity is one of those most powerful tools that can actually influence our lives. The World Health Organization estimates that up to half of cancers could be prevented through lifestyle and environmental changes. And movement really plays a major role in that. So looking at the evidence, we now have actually got really strong evidence that being physically active lowers the risk of several common cancers. So if you take a look over here at this nice infographic from Patel and colleagues, you will see that it reduces your risk of 7 different cancers, particularly bowel, breast, and womb cancer. Importantly, this isn't about being an elite sport participant or intense training. These benefits are actually seen with moderate, regular movement, such as your walking, your cycling, and just being more active during your daily life. So how does the exercise reduce the cancer risk, and how does physical activity help? We don't need to know all of the biology to benefit from movement, and I'm going to keep things simple. I'll keep the science light, but I'll give you the strong take-home message that you need to understand. Physical activity pretty much helps your body and your systems to work well. It does this by reducing things like inflammation, helps regulate your hormones, which are also linked to cancer risk, and it supports immune health and helps prevent excessive weight gain. And all of these factors together contribute to lowering your risk of cancer over time. Now we actually have evidence to suggest as well that exercise doesn't just reduce risk, it actually improves outcomes. And by being physically active, it's associated now, we know, with lowering risk of reoccurrence, reducing cancer-related mortality, and the benefits are seen after diagnosis, not just before. And I have some really nice quotes from the people who matter most to me at this, in all of this research, which are my participants. So I now feel healthier than I was before. I'm back in work full time. I have great energy, sleep better in the nighttime. I don't have that interrupted sleep because the tiredness I have is a genuine tiredness at the end of the full day. You haven't only saved me, you have given a family back their mother and their wife and their sister and friends back. So I think that is what's really important, that you are giving people back their role and you're giving people back their sense of purpose. But by not only this, you are also reducing their risk of a further reoccurrence. And large reviews of the evidence show that people who are physically active after a diagnosis have a lower risk of reoccurrence and improved survival. So movement doesn't just matter before cancer, it matters during and after the treatment because it supports people across the entire cancer journey. What I picked up on throughout my research is that there is a real fear of exercise and cancer. People are afraid of exacerbating potentially their cancer-related fatigue, which is the most debilitating side effect of cancer and its treatment. And this fear often can come from what a person says or from the advice they may have received and focusing on what I can't do rather than what we can do. There's fear of injury. There's fear of increasing pain. Here's some quotes from the research I had looked at. I was afraid then to do something because it was a case of if I did it, I'll be tired. Then I'm on my own with the kids. So tomorrow I have to be able to work and look after them. And you do actually become, sure, look, I'll do nothing because I need to save my energy for tomorrow. Another quote, we were told, like, don't put a heavy handbag on that shoulder. Mind the shoulder where I had the reconstruction. Mind the reconstruction. Be careful, with the safety belt in the car. All of them things like, what I mean. And you're always kind of fearful and fretful that something could happen. However, what we need to do is we need to get the message across that exercise is safe, especially during treatment. The evidence is clear. We have this from the American College of Sports Medicine's Special Interest Cancer Group, that exercise is safe for most people with cancer, including during treatment when appropriately guided. In fact, people are actually encouraged to avoid prolonged inactivity and return to normal daily activities as soon as possible. Movement doesn't have to mean going to the gym. This is something that I really want to enforce today. You don't have to go to the gym or make a big, huge lifetime change. It's about really enforcing that every movement counts or every move counts. So again, we can do this in our everyday life by making movement part of our everyday life. So at home, little short walks. If you find yourself sitting too long, get up, move about, do things that you may enjoy doing, like you're hoovering, you're cleaning, getting out and about in the garden, some short walks, little light strength exercises. And again, moving yourself during the TV or even getting up to switch off the TV rather than using a remote control. At work, things like, again, interrupting that sitting is so important. Maybe walking during your calls. I always say to my dad, that's a mobile phone for a reason. It'll keep you mobile. Active commuting where possible, where potentially the distance is short enough for you to actually walk. And sometimes I even do it whereby if I have to park a distance, I try and beat the shuttle bus up to the car park in SETU in Waterford. And oftentimes we can actually get there faster by walking. In the community then, there's things like your walking groups, you have those beautiful green spaces. We were blessed in Waterford with our Greenway and all of those community-based programs such as XWell, which I'll speak about a little bit further on. For me, it's about translating that research into practice, and I have a real graw for doing that. If we know that something works, we owe it to the participants, and ethically we need to translate that into practice so that the research doesn't sit on the shelf and it reaches the people where that need it most. And there are our cancer patients and the general population to reduce the risk of cancer within the country of Ireland and worldwide. So why community matters for me is people are more active when exercise is accessible. So if the environment is set up for you to become more mobile or include movement, you're more likely to engage in it. It's also really important that we have some sort of social support or support is available for us. Activities that feel safe and enjoyable, you're more likely to carry those out as well. And for me, community-based programs really, really bridge the gap between evidence and real life and play a really, really important role of translating this evidence into everyday life, helping people then feel more confident, safe, and supported to actually move more. So a good example of how research can be translated into practice is the XWELL program. And XWELL delivers clinically supervised exercise in local communities. Again, it's about making you feel safe. And it's for people living with and beyond cancer, but also people with additional chronic illnesses. It is grounded in evidence, and as I said, that's what's really important today. And it's grounded in the evidence that I've chatted to you about. But more importantly, it's designed about real people, not ideal scenarios. The focus is on safety, confidence, and enjoyment, helping people rebuild fitness, independence, and well-being in a way that feels achievable and supportive. XWELL, it isn't a one-size-fits-all solution, but it shows what's possible when physical activity is embedded into care pathways and supported beyond the clinic. Because programs like this, alongside other community and clinical initiatives, are essential if we want people to benefit from physical activity and make sure that it is accessible to everyone. So you can see here on the map, I have the locations that are throughout Dublin. There's a huge amount in Dublin and Dublin City, but not just Dublin City. We have them all over the country. And I have the Ireland map up there for you so you can see additional places. They have a fantastic website. They're on all the socials like your Instagram, your Facebook. So definitely take a look, and maybe it's something that you would like to even go have a look at. I'm sure that no centre would ever turn anybody away. So even getting in the door is your first step to actually getting involved. Another piece of research that I was involved in, and I need to again address the fact that it is not a one size fits all. And sometimes people don't maybe like going to the gym. So I was very lucky to be involved in a program that we call the Daisha Dance Project. And it was a pilot evaluation of a dance intervention for young women following cancer treatment. And what the aim was to again have that peer supported dance program for young women who were more than 6 weeks post treatment for primary lymphoma, leukemia, and breast cancer diagnosis. And what we did there, we again remember bringing it back to what they say about the support. It was a buddy system, and we have now translated that into practice. It was really, really well received, and we found that it was absolutely feasible. So that is up and running as well. It's a dance program that's run out of the Solace Cancer Support Centre in Waterford. Another example of how we're working to translate evidence into practice is the REACH project, which I am a principal investigator on with my wonderful PhD student Elisa. REACH is a Government of Ireland funded research project which focuses on one core question: how do we make evidence-based physical activity easier to access for people living with and beyond cancer? So what we're doing is, in simple terms, quite basically, we appreciate that there are, I suppose, resources out there, there are interventions out there, but what we want to know is identify, well, what are the really good ones that work? What is the evidence-based ones? And we're creating almost like a suite or a menu of options. And we have those scored where we have almost like a top 5. And now we've done that. And I mean, I make it sound easy, but that was almost 6 months of research. And that now has been condensed into like a suite or a little menu of options for patients that we will translate out and test as well. On this, I would also like to bring your attention to the fact that we don't actually know the physical activity levels of Irish cancer patients. And this is something that's extremely important. So I have a QR code to the study that we're actually undertaking. And I would only love if as many people who are affected by cancer or have had a cancer diagnosis could take part, because that way we will be able to look at that evidence and have an Irish statistic rather than basing ourselves on others throughout the world. This is one I'm very excited about, and I'm really glad that and happy that we have received seed funding from the Irish Cancer Society to make this happen. We know that exercise plays a critical role in prostate cancer survivorship, but we consistently see that men don't engage in the traditional gym programs. Therefore, I've developed along with my research team, the Men United, to address this gap, and it's informed by strong international evidence, particularly the Danish football prostate cancer initiative. It's the Danish FC, where I went and watched and saw that in life. And that uses recreational football as a culturally familiar, male-friendly way to support physical activity. And the programme has shown excellent feasibility and accessibility. So what we're looking to do is translate this evidence-based model into an Irish community context using sport and community settings to provide an accessible and appealing pathway into physical activity for men living with and beyond cancer. So again, that is just identifying that it's not a one size fits all. So let's try and look at ways that we can, I suppose, have those small steps to make the big impact. So to finish, the message is actually a very hopeful one. We now have strong evidence that physical activity resources reduce cancer risk and support people's cancer journey across the cancer care continuum. We know it's safe, and we know that any movement is better than none. What matters now is telling people that they should do, but making it easier for them to do something. That means access, support, choice through programs that are evidence-based, community embedded, and designed around real lives. Small steps really do matter, and when those steps are supported, they can make a big impact for individuals, for communities, and for cancer prevention. So knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do. We need to reach everybody to have that positive impact. And leaving research results on a shelf, it's not just an opportunity. I suppose it is, it's ways of actually providing and seeking hope and healing to the people that matter most. So again, thank you for being part of this amazing webinar. Especially like to thank the Irish Cancer Prevention Network for hosting it on World Cancer Day, all of my research participants, all of the funding and strategic partners that we have, the healthcare professionals, colleagues, professional networks, our cancer support centres across the country of Ireland, but most of all, the webinar participants for joining our webinar today. And thank you as well to all the participants who've taken part in my research.
Thank you, Dr. Sheehan. So now I'll invite all of our speakers to come back on for the panel discussion. Okay, so we have lots of questions coming in here. The first question I have is for Professor Moyna. So are the cancer protective effects more related to aerobic exercise, strength training, or both?
Great question. There was a paper recently published that again showed that it wasn't a one size fits all. And believe it or not, they showed that for fatigue associated with cancer, the cardiorespiratory fitness was by far the best modality. When it came to pain, it was strength training. And when it came to anxiety and depression, it was mind-body exercise. So we're now, it's only in the last few years that we're getting this knowledge that we have to be more focused on the advice that we give depending on the individual, the cancer, and what the side effect is.
Okay, that's really interesting. Thank you. So I have a question for Dr. Guinan here. If someone hasn't exercised in years, what's the simplest way to start without feeling overwhelmed?
It's a great question. And I think, all the speakers touched on it today, that I suppose when we're talking about being physically active, when we're talking about movement, we really are talking about every move matters. And I think in the first instance, being clear that when you're starting, don't set goals for yourself that are going to be unrealistic or going to be difficult for you to achieve. We're not talking about going to the gym and doing a really, really tough session. Starting with something that you enjoy, whether it is going for a walk with a friend, finding a class in your community, or something that's going to work for you. So setting small, realistic goals that you can celebrate then when you achieve them. And I think celebrating that every move matters, celebrating breaking up that sedentary behavior that we all spoke about as well. So I think that being realistic at the very start is really important.
So I have a question for Dr. Sheehan now. What types of exercises are included in a typical XWell session?
Well, again, across the board, you've got your aerobic type exercises. So you could be doing some marching on the spot. You could be doing some high knees. You'll also do some strength because, as I say, it's almost like you making a cake but forgetting an ingredient and not getting the whole health impact. So again, some strength exercises in there as well, and they're just to support like your muscle strength and your bone health. Balance and mobility exercises as well, because that's important and improves your confidence and helps reduction of fall risks as well. Flexibility and movement, so that they can actually support your everyday function as well. So again, there's a huge variety. There is great fun. From anything I ever see, it's nothing seems to be a chore there. Everybody is getting joined in, and the big thing is it's adapted to everybody's, they're to the individual. So, I would say to you, if it's something that you are thinking of, and you might be thinking that you won't be able to do it, again, flip that into, well, the focus here is what I can do, and that will be adapted so that it actually you will be able to take part in those. So again, the exercise professionals there, they take into account your cancer treatment, your stage, your symptoms. They're the ones that act, and it's clinically supervised as well. So it is a very, very safe space for somebody who is thinking about doing it.
So it's tailored really for the individual
Absolutely.
participant.
Yeah, absolutely. As I say, the guideline is there, but the individual prescription is what's really, really important. And that's what XWell does really, really well.
So I have another interesting question for Professor Moyna. So how can we promote the link between cancer and physical activity successfully, like we have done for other conditions such as heart disease and diabetes?
Obviously, education, awareness. Now that it's the number one killer cause of mortality, particularly in Ireland. I think other diseases, particularly cardiovascular disease, has had the floor for probably 30 years because it was the leading cause of death. And I think now, because cancer has moved up there, also acknowledging the tremendous work that's been done with prevention and particularly treatment of cancer, I think now it'll be more in the consciousness. I mean, a really good example is breast cancer. That, for every one woman that dies from breast cancer, 11 die from heart disease, and that message got out very, very early. So the focus has been on other diseases. I think now the cancer community have to really push to the same extent that cardiovascular disease has pushed for the last 50 years. I think once it becomes number one cause of mortality, I think people will take a lot more interest. And I would like to see that prevention. It's cumulative risk. Cumulative risk occurs over a lifetime, and I think we have to be much more focused, I believe, in primary prevention.
We still have a bit of work to do there in promoting awareness.
Yeah.
So another question for Dr. Guinan. So how do you suggest people handle pain, joint problems, or fear of injury when they're trying to be active?
Yeah. Well, look, I think, Patricia said it as well. Firstly, we need to get the message out there that exercise is safe. And, sometimes, there are barriers. If people, I suppose when you experience pain, it is a barrier, and it is something that you're concerned about. So, you want to listen to your body. You want to understand, well, look, is there injury there? Can you do something about it? Can you talk to your GP or to another health professional maybe about how you can manage that pain? But I suppose it's about identifying that barrier is there and listening to your body, and doing everything you can to try and overcome that. So it might be that you are conscious to take pain medication before you start exercising, for example, or to go to your physiotherapist to look at maybe other methods of managing pain. So I suppose, really trying to identify that's the issue and doing what you can to manage it.
And for Dr. Sheehan, how can someone be referred or sign up for the XWELL program?
So you can be referred through your healthcare professional, so your oncologist, your nurse, your physiotherapist, your GP, but you can also self-refer as well. And if people wanted more information, definitely have a look on their website. It's www.xwell.ie, but they also have their social media platforms as well on Instagram and all of that. And then the XWell team, they'll guide you then through an initial screening and assessment to ensure that the program then is appropriate and safe for them.
And just as a follow on to that, then is the program available in rural as well as urban communities?
Absolutely. As you see from the map, it's all across Ireland now. Us country folk down here have access as well. And that's the huge thing. It's making things accessible. And it's absolutely amazing to see all these centres popping up all over Ireland because they're needed. And that's the big thing now. We have the research. Now we need to reach the people who will actually benefit from it most.
Okay, and just for Dr. Guinan again, how can workplaces realistically support staff to move more during the day?
Yeah, look, I mean, there's lots of tips out there, in terms of how we can, embed exercise ourselves or embed movement ourselves, with kind of consciously breaking up that sedentary behavior. But you do see nice workplace initiatives as well, where they might have, kind of small internal competitions around step count or, activity-based social events and things like that. So they can be helpful as well. So again, it's around kind of finding what works in a particular setting, what people can access without barriers such as cost or transport, and that people enjoy.
Okay, and just a final question for Professor Moyna. What advice would you give to people who are currently inactive?
I think both Emer and Patricia have said it already, is that every single move counts. And normally, if you look at the scale, if you look at overall, most studies show that most of the benefits you get, not just for cancer, but for most diseases, occur from 0 steps to around 5,000, and then it starts to go off. People have this notion, I've got to get 10,000 steps, and if I don't get it, it's a waste of time. Every move, every step counts, and not just step, whether it's weight training, every form of activity counts. So going from doing nothing to doing something gives you the biggest bang for your buck. There's no doubt about that. So if you're doing nothing at all and you leave the house and you walk 3 minutes out and 3 minutes back, like that's 6 minutes. You're probably going to get more benefit from that than as much benefit from that if you walk for 12 minutes, particularly initially if you're unfit. So particularly if you're starting from scratch, any form of activity, and importantly, and I think Emer mentioned that, undertake activities that you enjoy. And social engagement is wonderful. If you exercise with someone else, you're more or less, unbeknownst to yourself, signing a social contract with that other person that you're going to be there. And it's just great to have that company, and having another partner to exercise with, it takes the pressure off you thinking that you have to go out every single day on your own. So again, key thing is that every single movement counts.
Yeah, I think, as you said, it's a really key message to get across because often people are intimidated by the idea of exercising, that they have to join the gym or they have to start running marathons or something. But as you said, there's huge benefit in involving yourself in any kind of movement or physical activity. So look, we have lots more questions coming in, but I suppose in the interest of time, we need to draw the webinar to a close. So thanks again to all of our speakers for the really engaging presentations and for the interesting panel discussion. For more information on cancer prevention, you can sign up for the Irish Cancer Prevention Network's quarterly e-zine at www.irishcancerpreventionnetwork.com, or you can go to hse.ie/prevent cancer. And finally, we'd really appreciate if you could just take a few minutes to complete the post-webinar survey, as your feedback is really valuable to us.